If you have that baby, I'll ruin your family, the millionaire CEO warned. But 4 years later, he saw her walking with a cute son. The noise of the waterfront party faded the moment Elwyn Bailey stepped into the park. Music thumped somewhere behind him, swallowed by distance, replaced by leaves brushing gently against one another. He loosened his tie, breathing in cool autumn air. Children ran across the grass. A dog barked happily near the fountain. It was ordinary, calm in a way his world rarely allowed. That was when he saw her. Kelly stood beneath a row of trees, sunlight moving across her hair as she laughed at something a small boy said. The child tugged at her sleeve, pointing at a cluster of fallen leaves like they were treasure. Elwyn slowed without realizing it. The boy looked about 4 years old, dark eyes, confident smile. Something in Elwyn's chest tightened. He didn't understand why he couldn't look away. Kelly turned slightly, brushing dirt from the child's jacket. "You're getting faster," she teased. "I'm racing the wind," the boy replied, serious and proud. Elwyn stopped walking. Her voice hadn't changed. She looked calmer now, not the careful professional he remembered, but someone grounded, at ease in her own space. He took one step forward before thinking. "Kelly." She froze. For a moment, she simply stared at him, measuring the years that had passed in silence. "Elwyn," she said quietly. The boy tilted his head, curious. "Mom, who's that?" "Mom." The word landed heavier than any business headline. Elwyn's breath caught. He crouched slightly so he wasn't towering over the child. "What's your name?" he asked. "D'Angelo," the boy answered, holding Kelly's hand tighter. Inside, questions moved faster than logic. 4 years earlier, Elwyn Bailey had said one sentence that ended a future he didn't fully understand. He had spoken from fear, the kind that hides behind polished confidence. Standing there now, watching Kelly's son laugh at a passing dog, he felt that memory pressing against him like a quiet accusation. He studied the child's smile. The timeline fit too well. Elwyn swallowed. Kelly noticed the shift in his expression. "You look surprised," she said, calm but guarded. "I didn't expect—" He stopped himself. Words felt clumsy. "You look happy," she gave a small nod. "Peace comes from choosing what matters." The answer sounded simple, but it carried years inside it. Elwyn realized something uncomfortable. He didn't know her life anymore. Maybe you've never stood in a park wondering if a single moment rewrote your entire future. Maybe you have. Have you ever pushed someone away because you thought control mattered more than connection? Elwyn once believed strength meant never letting emotion complicate success. He thought decisions made quickly were always the right ones. Now he watched a child chase leaves across the grass and wondered what version of himself had spoken back then, the confident leader or the man too afraid to slow down. Kelly's gaze lingered on him for a second longer than politeness required. "You've been busy," she said. "That's one way to put it. And are you happy?" He hesitated. That question had never felt harder. Elwyn Bailey was known for clarity. Investors trusted him. Employees admired him. His name carried weight in rooms filled with powerful voices. But none of that prepared him for this moment. He realized something unsettling. He had spent years building a life designed to avoid uncertainty, and now uncertainty stood right in front of him holding a small boy's hand. D'Angelo tugged at Kelly's sleeve again. "Can we stay a little longer?" "We can," she replied softly. Elwyn watched how naturally she moved. No rush, no pressure, just presence. He felt like a visitor in a world that might have once been his. "I never thought I'd see you here," he admitted. Seattle felt smaller than usual. "Life has a way of moving forward," she said gently. The words weren't harsh, but they weren't welcoming either. There was a time when Elwyn believed feelings were distractions. 4 years ago, he chose certainty over courage. Standing in that park, he felt the weight of choices that didn't fade with time. D'Angelo walked closer to him, studying him with curiosity that children never hide. "Do you know my mom from work?" the boy asked. Elwyn smiled faintly. "Something like that." Kelly watched the exchange carefully, her expression calm but protective. Viewers, you're about to see the moment that changed everything. The conversation that pushed them apart and the decision that shaped 4 years of silence. Because people don't become different overnight. Sometimes change starts with regret. Before we step back into the past, I want to ask you something simple. Have you ever said words you wished you could take back? If you've ever chosen fear over honesty, share it below. You might be surprised how many people understand that feeling. And if stories about growth, second chances, and quiet strength speak to you, take a moment to follow along with this journey. Because this story isn't about perfection. It's about learning to listen when life offers another chance. Elwyn stood there, unsure whether to stay or leave. Kelly broke the silence first. "We should get going," she told D'Angelo gently. The boy waved at Elwyn. "Bye." "See you around," Elwyn replied. Though he didn't know if that would be true, she nodded politely, then turned away. And just like that, the moment ended. Elwyn remained under the trees long after they disappeared down the path. The sound of laughter faded. Regret settled quietly where confidence used to be. He stared at the empty walkway, replaying every detail: her calm voice, the boy's smile, the life that had continued without him. 4 years earlier, everything had looked different. Back when Seattle's glass towers reflected ambition instead of memories. Back when Elwyn Bailey believed emotions were obstacles. Back when a woman named Kelly Gerlach walked into his conference room and said something no one else dared to say. "You don't really listen," she told him that day. And that was where it all began. Seattle woke slowly, like a place that never needed to rush to prove itself. Gray clouds rested low over the skyline, reflecting off towers of glass and steel, while early commuters crossed quiet streets with practiced focus. Elwyn Bailey liked the city this way, controlled, composed, efficient. His car rolled to a stop outside headquarters just as the sun broke through the clouds. The building rose high above the waterfront, its polished surface mirroring a version of success that felt untouchable. Employees moved quickly through the entrance, voices low, footsteps steady. No chaos, no wasted motion. Inside, screens flickered with market updates. Assistants coordinated schedules with precise timing. Everything moved forward, just like him. Elwyn stepped into the elevator, adjusting his cufflinks as numbers climbed toward the executive floor. His reflection stared back at him from the glass panel. Calm expression, straight posture, eyes focused on the next decision before it arrived. Outside his office window, ferries cut across the water in clean lines. He watched for a moment, then turned away. There was always more work waiting. His mornings followed a rhythm so consistent that even the staff could predict his steps. Coffee placed exactly where he preferred it. Tablet loaded with overnight reports. A short walk through the open workspace where employees straightened instinctively as he passed. "Morning, Mr. Bailey," one analyst said. He nodded once, not slowing. "Send me the revised projections before noon." By 9 o'clock he had already reviewed contracts, approved 2 expansions, and declined a partnership without hesitation. Efficiency wasn't just a habit, it was his shield. Lunch rarely involved food. Conversations replaced meals. Decisions replaced breaks. When his assistant mentioned a charity event invitation, he scanned it briefly. "Schedule a donation," he said, sliding the card back. "I won't attend." There was no cruelty in the decision, just practicality. Emotion slowed people down. And Elwyn had built a life designed to move faster than hesitation. The boardroom fell silent the moment he entered. Large screens displayed charts that climbed steadily upward, proof of the company's momentum under his leadership. "Let's begin," he said, taking his seat at the head of the table. Executives exchanged quick glances before launching into updates. Every sentence felt measured, careful. One director hesitated during a presentation, fumbling slightly with a statistic. Elwyn leaned forward. "Numbers don't need decoration," he said evenly. "Just clarity." The correction wasn't harsh, but it landed with precision. By the time the meeting ended, agreements had been reached, risks minimized, and expectations reset. People left the room both relieved and intimidated. A junior manager whispered to a colleague outside the glass doors. "He notices everything. That's why we're winning," the other replied. Inside, Elwyn closed his tablet and stared at the empty chairs for a second longer than necessary. Winning had become routine. Feeling anything about it had not. Cameras flashed outside the building later that afternoon as reporters gathered near the entrance. A tech journalist approached with a microphone the moment Elwyn stepped outside. "Mr. Bailey, your company's expansion into global markets is getting attention everywhere. What's your secret?" He offered a controlled smile. "Consistency. Listening to data more than noise." The answer sounded polished, rehearsed, exactly what people expected. Photos captured him from every angle: confident posture, steady gaze, tailored suit catching the light. Online headlines described him as focused, unstoppable, disciplined. No one asked what his evenings looked like after the cameras disappeared. A publicist handed him a tablet showing rising engagement numbers. "People admire how composed you are," she said. He nodded politely. Admiration had never felt the same as connection. When the workday ended, the office emptied quickly. Elwyn remained. He stood near the window watching the city lights flicker on one by one. Boats moved slowly across dark water while laughter drifted faintly from a nearby restaurant patio. His phone buzzed. Another invitation to a networking event. He ignored it. The silence inside his office felt heavy but familiar. He told himself it was peaceful, yet sometimes he caught himself staring at old messages without opening them, as if searching for something he couldn't name. He shook the thought away, returning to spreadsheets. Control felt safer than curiosity. Downstairs in the employee lounge, conversations softened whenever Elwyn's name came up. "He's fair," one engineer said. "Just distant. He never loses focus," another added. "I don't think he ever slows down," a new hire asked quietly. "Does he ever joke around?" The group exchanged uncertain looks. Respect followed him everywhere, but warmth rarely did. When Elwyn walked through the corridor later, people greeted him with professionalism, not familiarity. He noticed it, even if he never acknowledged it aloud. The space around him always seemed slightly wider, as if others instinctively left room for a leader who preferred distance. Late afternoon sunlight stretched across the conference room table when his assistant knocked lightly. "There's a consultant here for the strategy review," she said. "Kelly Gerlach." Elwyn skimmed the briefing file without much interest. Another advisor, another meeting. "Send her in," he replied. The door opened. She walked in with calm confidence, carrying nothing but a tablet and a quiet awareness that immediately changed the room's energy. Most people entered with nervous smiles or rehearsed introductions. Kelly didn't rush. She took a seat across from him, meeting his gaze without hesitation. For the first time that day, Elwyn felt something unfamiliar, curiosity that had nothing to do with numbers or strategy. The meeting began, and the version of his life he had carefully controlled started to shift in ways he didn't yet understand. The conference room carried the usual stillness of high-level meetings, screens glowing softly, executives seated in quiet anticipation, notebooks open like shields against mistakes. Elwyn Bailey remained at the head of the table, reviewing the agenda without looking up when the door opened. Footsteps approached with steady confidence. Kelly Gerlach stepped inside, her presence calm rather than loud. She wore simple professional attire, nothing designed to impress, yet the room seemed to shift slightly as she took her seat. "Thank you for having me," she said, her voice clear and grounded. Most consultants filled the air with introductions or praise. Kelly simply nodded to the group and opened her tablet. Elwyn glanced up briefly, expecting nervousness. Instead, she met his gaze without hesitation. Not challenging, just honest. It caught him off guard more than he expected. "Let's begin," he said. The presentation started smoothly, numbers moving across the screen as she explained strategic adjustments with quiet clarity. Her tone never rose, never rushed. She spoke like someone used to being heard, not someone asking for permission. Several executives exchanged impressed looks. Elwyn listened, arms crossed, searching for flaws. But she didn't perform for approval. She simply spoke. Midway through her presentation, Elwyn raised a hand. "You're assuming long-term stability in a market that shifts weekly," he said. "That's optimistic." Most consultants would have softened immediately. "It's realistic," she replied. "If the company stops reacting and starts listening." A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Elwyn leaned forward slightly. "We listen to data." She tilted her head just enough to show she disagreed. "You listen to data after deciding what you wanted to say." The statement landed quietly, but heavily. Someone coughed near the far end of the table. No one interrupted. Kelly continued calmly. "You don't really listen in conversations either. You wait for people to finish so you can win." The air felt still. Eyes moved between them, unsure whether to look away or stay focused. For several seconds, no one spoke. Elwyn's reputation for control filled the space like a warning. Staff members held their breath, expecting irritation or dismissal. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, studying her with careful interest. The silence stretched. One executive glanced at the door as if preparing for the meeting to end abruptly. Kelly didn't break eye contact. She waited. Elwyn finally exhaled slowly. "And you always speak this directly?" he asked. "Only when it matters," she said. The tension softened slightly, not gone, but shifting into something more curious than hostile. Most people tried to earn Elwyn's approval. Kelly didn't seem interested in winning anything. He rested his hands on the table. "Explain what you mean by listening differently." Instead of rushing to defend herself, she asked a question. "When was the last time someone disagreed with you and you didn't try to correct them immediately?" A few executives looked down at their notes, hiding small smiles. Elwyn considered the question longer than expected. "Disagreement isn't a problem," he said. "I just prefer efficiency." She nodded. "Efficiency is useful, but connection is what makes people stay invested." The conversation shifted from strategy to perspective, not confrontational, just honest. For the first time in months, Elwyn felt like the meeting wasn't following a script he had memorized. He found himself listening more carefully than usual. The presentation turned into an exchange rather than a lecture. "What would you change first?" he asked. She pointed to a chart. "Communication tone. The company sounds powerful, but not human." "Human doesn't always scale," he replied. "Maybe," she said. "But people follow leaders who feel real, not perfect." Her answers came without hesitation, yet never felt aggressive. At one point she smiled lightly. You're already preparing your next argument, aren't you? You notice everything. It's my job. The room relaxed slightly as conversation flowed naturally. Other executives began contributing ideas, encouraged by the shift in tone. Elwyn realized he wasn't trying to dominate the discussion. He was curious about where it might go. Toward the end of the meeting, an assistant entered quietly with coffee. She placed a cup near Kelly and whispered, "Mr. Bailey personally requested that." Kelly nodded politely but didn't react with awe. "Thank you," she said, turning back to her notes without lingering on the gesture. Most people treated small signs of attention from Elwyn like trophies. Kelly treated them like normal kindness. She shrugged lightly. Titles matter in contracts, not in conversations. A few executives exchanged surprised glances. Elwyn found himself smiling faintly. It wasn't defiance he sensed from her, just independence, and that independence made the room feel less rigid. As the meeting wrapped up, Kelly gathered her tablet calmly. "Thank you for the honesty," she said. "It makes better work possible." Elwyn nodded. "Most people don't risk speaking that way." She met his eyes again. "Most people are afraid honesty will cost them something." Maybe she was right. Before she left, the room felt different, lighter, more open than it had been all morning. Elwyn watched the door close behind her, realizing he hadn't felt challenged in a way that made him think rather than defend. And for anyone listening to this story right now, let me ask you something simple. When was the last time someone spoke honestly to you? Not to impress, not to argue, but to help you see yourself clearly. Sometimes the people who change our lives aren't the loudest voices in the room. Sometimes they're the ones brave enough to speak when silence feels safer. Elwyn glanced at the empty chair she had left behind. For the first time in a long while, he didn't rush into the next meeting. He sat there thinking about a conversation that didn't follow his rules and wondering why he wanted to hear her speak again. After that first strategy session, Kelly's name appeared on Elwyn's calendar more often than he expected. At first, it was strictly professional. Progress updates, financial adjustments, small revisions to long-term planning. But something about the conversations felt different from his usual meetings. They didn't end the moment the agenda ran out. One afternoon, after a discussion about branding tone, Kelly closed her tablet and leaned back slightly. "You always answer questions before people finish asking them," she said with a soft smile. "It saves time, or maybe it keeps things safe." Elwyn paused, unsure whether she meant it as criticism. "What makes you think I'm trying to stay safe?" She shrugged. "You control the pace of every room you walk into." It wasn't accusatory, just observant. He considered responding with a clever defense, but instead he found himself asking, "And what do you do?" "I slow things down enough to notice what people avoid saying." That answer stayed with him longer than he expected. Meetings began stretching past their scheduled time, drifting into conversations that had nothing to do with charts or deadlines. And for once, Elwyn didn't mind. It started with a simple suggestion. "We've been talking for 3 hours, Kelly said one morning. "You should step outside before your next meeting." "I don't take long breaks," he replied. She raised an eyebrow. "Then consider this a professional recommendation." 10 minutes later, they stood in a quiet cafe near the waterfront, steam curling from paper cups, while rain tapped gently against the windows. Elwyn noticed how easily she blended into the space, greeting the barista, smiling at a child drawing on a napkin nearby. "You come here often?" he asked. "When I need quiet," she said. "It helps me think." He glanced at the people around them, students typing on laptops, couples sharing pastries, a musician tuning a guitar in the corner. "This isn't exactly my environment." She laughed softly. "That's why it's good for you." They walked back slowly, coffee warming their hands, conversation shifting away from business. It felt unfamiliar, but comfortable. Over the following weeks, their talks drifted into personal territory without either of them planning it. One evening, while reviewing a campaign proposal, a song played faintly through the office speakers. Kelly paused. "That reminds me of my dad's old car," she said. "He used to play it on long drives when I was little." Elwyn looked up. "You remember details like that?" "Music holds memories," she replied. "Don't you have songs that take you back somewhere?" He hesitated before answering. "My mother used to play piano at night. I'd stay up pretending to read just to listen." It was the first time he had mentioned his family without being asked. Kelly didn't react dramatically. She simply nodded, as if trusting him to continue if he wanted. "What did you want to be growing up?" she asked. "Someone in control of his future," he said quietly. "And now?" He didn't answer immediately. The question lingered between them, heavier than any corporate discussion. One rainy evening, they stood near the tall office windows after everyone else had left. Seattle stretched out beneath them, lights reflecting across the water like scattered gold. "You ever slow down long enough to enjoy this?" Kelly asked. Elwyn crossed his arms lightly. Slowing down is how people lose momentum. She stepped closer to the glass, watching ferries move slowly across the bay. Or maybe it's how people finally notice what they've been missing. He studied her reflection beside his. For a moment, neither of them spoke. I used to think success would feel louder, he admitted quietly. More satisfying. And does it? It feels steady, he said, searching for the right word, but not always meaningful. Kelly turned toward him, her expression gentle rather than surprised. That sounds lonely. The honesty of the moment unsettled him, yet he didn't pull away. Instead, he stayed there, watching the city through the glass, feeling something shift inside him that had nothing to do with ambition. Their conversations grew deeper as weeks passed. During a walk along the waterfront, Kelly glanced at him thoughtfully. Why is control so important to you? He kept his gaze forward. Because unpredictability costs people everything. That sounds like experience talking. It's logic. She shook her head slightly. Logic doesn't usually come with that much emotion behind it. He stopped walking. What makes you think I'm emotional about it? You plan every detail, she said gently. Even the way you end conversations. That's not just leadership, that's protection. Her words weren't confrontational, yet they felt precise. Elwyn exhaled slowly. You analyze people as much as strategies. It helps me understand what motivates them. And what do you think motivates me? She smiled faintly. You want to win. But you also want to feel safe enough to stop proving yourself. The statement lingered long after they continued walking. Over time, their dynamics softened into light humor. During one late meeting, Elwyn caught himself checking his phone. Waiting for an emergency? Kelly asked. No. Just making sure nothing falls apart while I'm here. She laughed. The company survived before you became a work machine. I'm not a machine. Give me one spontaneous decision you've made this week. He thought for a moment and came up empty. That's what I thought, she teased. She tilted her head playfully. Maybe, but I'm brave enough to call you out when you hide behind schedules. He smiled despite himself. You're not as fearless as you pretend, he said. The room felt lighter, warmer, like a space where both of them could relax without losing themselves. One evening, after a long walk through quiet streets glowing with rain, they stopped near the building entrance. Neither of them rushed to leave. You're different outside the office, Kelly said softly. So are you? She studied him for a moment, as if deciding whether to say something more. I think you're capable of more than the version of yourself you show at work, she said. Elwyn held her gaze longer than usual. And I think you see things most people miss. The air between them felt calm, steady, yet something unspoken lingered just beneath the surface, a connection neither of them named. As she turned to leave, she smiled lightly. Try slowing down tomorrow, just once. No promises, he replied. But as he watched her walk away, he realized something unexpected. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about the next deal or deadline. He was thinking about a conversation, and how easily it had made the world feel quieter. Warmth settled in, mixed with a quiet tension he couldn't quite explain. And somewhere deep down, Elwyn sensed that whatever this connection was becoming, it wouldn't stay simple for long. The shift began quietly. An investor meeting that usually focused on growth projections turned unexpectedly personal. Elwyn, one board member said, fingers resting lightly on a stack of reports, your leadership has always been defined by discipline. Lately, people are noticing changes. He kept his posture relaxed. Changes tend to follow expansion. Another investor leaned forward. It's not about the numbers. It's perception. Elwyn's gaze sharpened slightly. Perception of what? A brief pause settled over the room before the answer came. You've been seen outside work more often. With the consultant, no accusation. Just calculated concern. Elwyn folded his hands together. Kelly is part of a strategy review. That's all. Of course, the investor replied smoothly. We simply want to ensure distractions don't affect long-term stability. The word distractions lingered long after the meeting ended. For the first time, the professional world he controlled so carefully felt like it was watching him more closely than usual. In the weeks that followed, the atmosphere inside meetings changed. Executives spoke more cautiously. Conversations carried a quiet tension that hadn't existed before. During one strategy session, Elwyn noticed two board members exchanging looks when Kelly's name appeared on the agenda. We need to maintain focus, one director said. Public confidence matters as much as performance. Elwyn's voice stayed even. Our results speak for themselves. Yes, the director agreed. But leaders are symbols. Personal decisions influence trust. The message was clear without being direct. Elwyn responded with sharper efficiency than usual, cutting discussion short, moving through reports quickly, leaving little space for personal remarks. The room felt colder. He felt it too, even if he didn't admit it aloud. Rumors moved faster than official statements. In the hallway outside the executive floor, two managers lowered their voices when Elwyn passed. "I heard they've been seen walking near the waterfront," one whispered. "People are saying he's distracted," the other replied. He continued walking without acknowledging them, but the words followed him into the elevator. Later, a tech blog published a vague article about a high-profile CEO whose private life was becoming more visible. No names were mentioned, but colleagues began sending him cautious messages asking if everything was under control. Elwyn ignored most of them. Still, something inside him tightened. Not anger, just pressure building quietly behind his composure. Kelly noticed a change before he said anything. Their meetings became shorter. His responses felt more formal. During one afternoon discussion, she closed her laptop and studied him carefully. "You've been distracted lately," she said. "Just managing expansion," he replied, avoiding her eyes. "That's not all." He shifted his attention back to a report. "We should stay focused on work." The words sounded colder than he intended. She watched him for a moment, sensing a wall rising where openness once lived. Later that week, he canceled a planned coffee break with a brief message: schedule conflict. No explanation, no humor, just distance. Rain fell steadily against Kelly's apartment windows when she heard a knock. Elwyn stood outside, shoulders tense, eyes tired in a way she had never seen before. "Can I come in?" he asked. She stepped aside quietly. Inside, the space felt warm, soft lighting, music playing faintly from a speaker. He looked around as if noticing a different world from the one he lived in. "What's going on?" she asked gently. He ran a hand through his hair. "Investors are watching everything. They think personal attachments make leaders unpredictable." "And you agree with them?" she asked. He hesitated. "I need things to stay simple." Her expression softened, but confusion flickered in her eyes. "Simple doesn't mean distant." "This isn't about you," he said quickly. "It's about stability." Kelly crossed her arms lightly. "You don't have to pretend with me. If you're scared, just say it." "I'm not scared," he replied, though his voice lacked its usual certainty. Silence filled the room. For the first time since they met, he looked unsure of himself, like a man carrying expectations heavier than ambition alone. After that night, their conversations lost some of their warmth. Elwyn still showed up for meetings, but his energy felt guarded. He stopped lingering after discussions. Walks along the waterfront became rare. One afternoon, Kelly watched him pack his laptop quickly. "You're leaving already?" she asked. "I have another call." "You always have another call," she said softly. He paused, sensing disappointment in her voice. "I'm trying to keep everything balanced," he explained. "Balance doesn't mean shutting people out," she replied. He didn't answer. As he walked away, she felt the gap between them growing. Not dramatic, just quiet and steady, like a door slowly closing. The city lights blurred through Elwyn's office window that evening as he replayed conversations in his head. Investors' warnings, staff whispers, Kelly's quiet questions. For the first time in years, he felt pulled in opposite directions. One path built on certainty, the other filled with emotion he couldn't fully control. His phone buzzed with another message from the board requesting a private discussion about leadership optics. He set it aside. Outside, rain traced slow lines down the glass. He thought about Kelly's apartment, the warmth, the honesty, the way she looked at him without expectation, and he wondered if stepping closer to her meant risking everything he had built. Across the city, Kelly stood by her own window, sensing the distance growing even without words. Neither of them knew what the next conversation would bring, but both felt it coming, a moment that would force choices neither of them were ready to make. The uncertainty lingered quietly between them, heavier than any argument. And somewhere beneath the pressure, fear waited, patient, unseen and powerful enough to change everything. The cafe near the waterfront was nearly empty that afternoon. Soft music played in the background, blending with the faint sound of rain tapping against the windows. Outside, people hurried past with umbrellas, but inside everything felt still, almost suspended. Elwyn arrived first. He chose a table near the corner, one that gave him a clear view of the entrance. His phone rested face down beside a cup of untouched coffee. He checked the time again. Kelly was rarely late. When the door finally opened and she stepped inside, something about her expression told him this meeting wasn't casual. She moved slowly, as if weighing each step before taking it. "Hi," she said softly as she reached the table. "Elwyn—" He nodded, standing briefly before sitting again. "You sounded serious on the phone. I needed to talk somewhere quiet." Her voice carried calmness, but her hands remained folded tightly in front of her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence felt heavier than any boardroom tension. Kelly took a slow breath, her gaze steady on him. "I've been thinking about how to say this," she admitted. Elwyn leaned forward slightly, searching her expression for clues. "You're worrying me." She gave a small, almost apologetic smile. "I'm pregnant." The words arrived without drama, without hesitation, just quiet truth placed gently between them. For a second he didn't react. The world around him seemed to fade into a distant blur, the sound of cups clinking, the soft murmur of other conversations, all dissolving into silence. Kelly watched him carefully, waiting for something, anything. "I wanted you to hear it from me," she added calmly. Elwyn's thoughts moved faster than logic. Headlines, board meetings, investor expectations. His chest tightened as if the room had grown smaller. "How far along?" he asked, his voice controlled but strained. "A few weeks," she replied. He nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the table. Numbers and consequences replaced emotion in his mind. This changes everything. He imagined conversations with shareholders, the way rumors would spread, the fragile balance he had fought to maintain slipping beyond his control. "You seem very calm," he said finally. "I've had time to think," she answered. "I know it's unexpected." Unexpected felt like an understatement. His pulse quickened, a quiet fear building beneath his composed exterior. Elwyn leaned back, exhaling slowly, as if trying to regain control. "This complicates things," he said carefully. "It doesn't have to," Kelly replied. He shook his head, the pressure finally pushing past his restraint. "If you have that baby," he said, voice tightening despite his effort to stay calm, "you'll ruin everything around me. My company, my family's name. I can't let that happen." The words hung in the air, sharper than he intended, heavier than anything he had ever said to her. Kelly didn't react immediately. She simply looked at him. Not angry, just quiet. The cafe felt impossibly still. A server passed by their table, glancing briefly at the tension before moving on. Elwyn's breathing slowed, but the weight of what he had said settled heavily between them. He opened his mouth as if to clarify, then stopped. Kelly's gaze remained steady, not confrontational, not pleading, just disappointed. Outside, rain continued to fall, blurring the view of the waterfront. Time stretched. Neither of them reached for their coffee. "I thought you were braver than that," she said quietly. Her voice didn't rise. There was no anger behind it, only sadness. "This isn't personal," he replied quickly, grasping for logic. She shook her head slowly. "It is," she said. "You're just afraid to admit it." He searched for something stronger to say, a reason, a defense, but nothing felt right. "You've built your whole life around control," she continued gently, "but some things aren't meant to be managed like business decisions." Her calmness made the moment feel heavier, not lighter. Kelly stood, smoothing her jacket as if closing a chapter without needing permission. "I didn't come here to argue," she said. "I just wanted honesty between us." Elwyn remained seated, unsure how to respond. Part of him wanted to reach for her hand, to take back the words that had already settled into the space between them, but pride held him still. She placed a small amount of cash on the table for her drink, even though she had barely touched it. "I hope one day you understand what really matters," she said softly. Then she turned and walked toward the door. No raised voices, no dramatic gestures, just quiet distance growing with every step. The bell above the entrance chimed gently as she left, and Elwyn sat there alone, surrounded by silence that felt louder than anything she could have said. Sometimes the hardest moments aren't filled with anger. Sometimes they end in quiet words spoken from fear. Have you ever pushed someone away because you thought protecting your future mattered more than protecting a connection? Think about that for a second, and if you've ever regretted something said in a moment of pressure, share your thoughts below. Elwyn remained at the table long after Kelly disappeared into the rain. He told himself he had made a practical decision. He told himself it was necessary. But as the cafe emptied around him, a feeling he couldn't name settled quietly in his chest, a sense that something important had just slipped beyond his reach. And for the first time, success didn't feel like protection. It felt like distance. Time didn't announce its passing. It simply moved forward, one meeting, one contract, one decision at a time. 4 years slipped by in the rhythm Elwyn Bailey knew best: early mornings, late nights, flights that blurred cities into quiet hotel rooms and glass conference spaces. Seattle's skyline changed subtly with new construction, and so did his company's reach. Offices opened across continents. Partnerships formed faster than anyone predicted. To the outside world, he looked unstoppable. Inside, he rarely paused long enough to notice how much had changed. He stopped walking near the waterfront cafe. He stopped asking himself why. Screens inside headquarters displayed maps marked with expanding markets: Europe, Asia, South America, each milestone celebrated with strategic confidence. "Good," he replied simply, already moving to the next report. Quarterly meetings turned into global broadcasts. Employees watched from different time zones as he outlined future goals with steady precision. Investors praised his focus. Colleagues admired his discipline. He traveled often, stepping off private flights into rooms filled with applause and expectations. Every achievement added another layer to his reputation, but success arrived quietly, without the excitement he once imagined. It felt like momentum, constant, unbreakable, and strangely distant. Awards began lining the walls of his office, glass plaques, framed magazine covers, photographs of him shaking hands with influential figures. During interviews, journalists asked predictable questions. What drives you to keep pushing forward? One host asked during a televised segment. Consistency, he answered calmly, and learning from every challenge. The audience applauded. Headlines described him as visionary, composed, disciplined. After each interview, assistants handed him updated schedules before the cameras even cooled. Public admiration followed him everywhere, but it never stayed long enough to feel personal. One evening after a ceremony, a reporter asked, "Do you ever slow down?" He offered the same polished smile. "Not when there's more to build." The answer sounded strong. It also felt incomplete. His apartment overlooked the water, designed with clean lines and minimal decoration. A place meant for rest, but rarely used that way. At night, city lights reflected across the glass walls while he sat alone reviewing documents. The silence felt familiar. No laughter echoing through the hallway. No casual conversations waiting at the end of the day. Just the low hum of electronics and the occasional sound of waves against the shore. Sometimes he poured a drink and stood near the window longer than necessary, watching ferries glide across the dark water. He told himself solitude was peaceful. Yet there were moments when he noticed how empty the space felt, how easily work filled every corner where something else might have existed. One afternoon, during a rare break between meetings, Elwin walked past the cafe where everything had changed years earlier. He slowed without meaning to. Through the window, a couple sat at the same table where Kelly once spoke quietly across from him. He could almost hear her voice again, calm, steady, honest. "I thought you were braver than that." The memory arrived suddenly, refusing to fade. He stood there longer than he intended, hands in his pockets, watching strangers share laughter he couldn't quite relate to. For a brief second, he wondered what life might have looked like if he had chosen differently. Then his phone buzzed with another notification. He turned away, leaving the cafe behind once more. From the outside, Elwin's life appeared perfect. The company continued to rise. Invitations to exclusive events filled his calendar. Colleagues spoke about him with admiration that bordered on awe. Yet late at night, when the city quieted and work finally paused, he felt something missing. Not dramatic, just a quiet absence he couldn't name. He listened more during meetings, spoke less during interviews, as if searching for meaning beyond achievement. Sometimes he caught himself watching families walking along the waterfront, wondering what it felt like to belong to something beyond ambition. He never reached out to Kelly. Pride disguised itself as logic, convincing him that the past was better left untouched. Still, every success carried a faint echo, a reminder that reaching the top of every goal didn't guarantee peace. And somewhere beneath the polished image the world admired, Elwin Bailey began to realize that winning alone didn't feel the way he once believed it would. The launch party filled the waterfront tower with energy that felt almost electric. Glass walls reflected moving lights from holographic displays, and conversations overlapped in confident tones. Investors discussing projections, developers explaining new technology, cameras capturing every moment. Elwin Bailey moved through the room with practiced ease, offering brief smiles and firm handshakes. "Congratulations," a partner told him, raising a glass. "This platform changes everything. It's only the beginning," Elwin replied smoothly. Music pulsed beneath the chatter. Screens showcased innovation in bright colors, while assistants guided guests toward the main stage. From the outside, it looked like another perfect evening, another milestone reinforcing his reputation. But after the speeches ended and applause faded, he felt the familiar restlessness creeping in. He stepped away from the crowd, loosening his tie slightly as he headed toward the exit. The noise softened behind him. Outside, cool air replaced the warmth of the crowded hall. For a moment, he simply stood there, breathing in the quiet. A narrow path led from the building toward a nearby park lined with tall trees. Golden leaves drifted slowly to the ground, catching the last light of evening. Elwin walked without thinking, hands in his pockets, letting the distance between him and the party grow. Children's laughter carried through the air, light, unguarded. He paused near a bench, watching families gathered under the trees. Someone flew a small kite near the edge of the grass while a dog chased after it enthusiastically. The calmness felt unfamiliar compared to the intensity he had just left behind. He almost turned back toward the building. Then he saw her. Kelly stood beneath a tree, sunlight filtering through the leaves around her. She looked different, not changed in a dramatic way, but steadier, more grounded. Her laughter came easily as she knelt beside a small boy who was trying to stack fallen leaves into a messy pile. The child's eyes shone with curiosity, his voice bright as he asked questions faster than she could answer. Elwyn stopped walking. For a second he wondered if he was imagining it, if memory had blended with reality. It was Kelly, and she looked happy. A quiet warmth surrounded her, something he hadn't noticed during their corporate days. His chest tightened. 4 years of distance collapsed into a single moment. He stayed where he was, watching from a distance longer than he meant to. Part of him wanted to walk away before she noticed him. Another part refused to move. The boy ran a few steps ahead, laughing as a breeze scattered leaves across the path. Kelly followed, calling out gently, "Slow down, D'Angelo." The name echoed in Elwyn's thoughts. D'Angelo. He repeated it silently, unsure why it felt familiar already. He took one step forward, then stopped again. What would he even say? Years ago, their last conversation ended in silence, heavy enough to break anything that once felt strong between them. Now she stood only a few yards away, unaware of his presence. He felt a hesitation he rarely experienced. Not fear of failure, but fear of reopening something unfinished. Finally, before he could change his mind again, he spoke. "Kelly." She turned slowly. For a brief moment, surprise crossed her face. Not shock, just recognition, mixed with quiet caution. "Elwyn," she said. Her voice sounded the same, calm and steady. He approached carefully, unsure how close to stand. "You look well," he said, choosing the safest words he could find. She nodded politely. "Life moves forward." The boy stepped closer to her side, studying Elwyn with open curiosity. Elwyn crouched slightly, lowering himself to the child's level. "What's your name?" he asked gently. Before the boy could answer, Kelly spoke softly. "This is D'Angelo." Elwyn repeated the name silently, feeling something shift inside him. He glanced at Kelly, searching her expression for answers she hadn't offered yet. "You look happy," he said. "I learned that peace comes from choosing what matters," she replied. The words sounded simple, but they carried years of growth he hadn't witnessed. The boy tugged at her sleeve. "Mom?" he asked. "Is he your friend?" The words settled heavily between them. "Mom." Elwyn felt his breath catch, a quiet realization forming faster than he could process it. Kelly met his gaze briefly, her expression calm but guarded, as if waiting to see how he would respond. "Yes," she said gently to the child. "He's an old friend." "Old friend." The phrase sounded safe, distant enough to protect them both. Elwyn nodded slowly, trying to keep his voice steady. "Nice to meet you, D'Angelo." The boy smiled. "Do you like kites? Mine broke yesterday. I used to build them when I was younger," Elwyn replied. "Maybe you can help me fix one," D'Angelo said with hopeful innocence. Elwyn glanced at Kelly, unsure whether he should answer. She didn't stop the conversation. She simply watched. The three of them stood there for a moment that felt strangely fragile. Leaves moved gently across the path as the sun dipped lower behind the trees. "I didn't expect to see you here," Elwyn admitted quietly. "I live nearby," she replied. "It's peaceful." He nodded, unsure how to ask the questions forming in his mind. Years of silence hung between them, not hostile, just heavy. D'Angelo pulled at Kelly's hand again. "Can we go see the fountain?" "In a minute," she said softly. Elwyn realized he didn't want the moment to end, even though he didn't know what came next. "I'd like to catch up," he said carefully, "if you're open to it." Kelly considered his words for a second, her expression thoughtful rather than guarded. "We'll see," she replied gently. It wasn't rejection, it wasn't acceptance either, just possibility. As she walked with D'Angelo toward the fountain, Elwyn remained where he stood, watching them move through golden light. For the first time in years, he didn't feel certain about anything. He only knew that seeing her again had stirred something he had spent a long time trying to ignore, a sense that the past wasn't finished with him yet. A few days after their unexpected meeting in the park, Elwyn found himself walking the same path again. Not by accident. He told himself it was a break from work, but when he saw Kelly sitting on a bench watching D'Angelo draw shapes in the dirt with a stick, he knew why he had come. She noticed him before he spoke. "Hi," he said quietly, keeping a respectful distance. "Hi," she replied, her tone calm but measured. There was no dramatic reunion, no long explanation of the past, just a simple moment where two people stood unsure of how much to say. "How's school going?" he asked, glancing toward D'Angelo. "Good," she answered. "He asks a lot of questions." "That sounds familiar," Elwyn said with a faint smile. The conversation stayed light, weather, work schedules, small updates, like stepping onto a bridge, one careful step at a time. Neither of them rushed. And for the first time since their separation, silence didn't feel heavy. Over the following weeks, their interactions became more regular. Elwin didn't push for long meetings or emotional discussions. Instead, he asked simple questions, the kind that showed interest without pressure. What does he like to read? Does he enjoy drawing? Is he into sports yet? Kelly answered politely, though she watched him closely, measuring his intentions. One afternoon, while they walked along the waterfront, Elwin knelt slightly to speak to D'Angelo. "What's your favorite thing to do after school?" he asked. "Build stuff," the boy replied proudly. "I made a rocket from cardboard." Elwin nodded with genuine interest. "That sounds impressive." He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was learning, slowly, quietly, how to be present in a world that didn't revolve around schedules or achievements. Kelly noticed the difference. He listened more now, spoke less. Even as conversations grew easier, Kelly kept a certain distance. She didn't invite him into their home. She didn't ask about his personal life. Every interaction remained grounded in the present, never drifting too far into memories. One evening, as they watched D'Angelo run across the grass, she said softly, "I appreciate that you're taking things slow." "I don't expect anything," Elwin replied. "I just want to show up when it's okay." Her eyes searched his face, as if trying to understand what had changed. "You used to try to control every outcome," she said. "I'm learning not to," he admitted. The honesty surprised even him. She nodded slightly, but her caution remained, not coldness, just protection built from experience. D'Angelo warmed Elwin quickly. Children rarely carried the weight of adult history, and to him, Elwin was simply someone who listened and answered questions without talking down to him. One afternoon, the boy ran up holding a broken kite frame. "It snapped when the wind got strong," he said, showing the bent sticks. Elwin examined it carefully. "We can fix this." "You know how?" D'Angelo asked, eyes bright. "I used to build them when I was younger." Kelly watched quietly, unsure whether to step in. But D'Angelo's excitement felt natural, unforced. "Can we try now?" he asked. Elwin glanced at Kelly, waiting for permission rather than assuming it. After a brief pause, she nodded. "All right." That small agreement felt bigger than words. They sat at a picnic table near the edge of the park, carefully aligning thin wooden sticks while D'Angelo held the string. Elwin worked patiently, explaining each step in simple terms. "Balance matters," he said gently. "Too tight, and it won't fly right." D'Angelo listened closely, repeating instructions as if memorizing them. Kelly stood a few feet away, watching the interaction unfold. There was no showmanship in Elwin's actions, no attempt to prove himself. Just quiet focus. When the kite finally lifted into the air, D'Angelo laughed loudly, running across the grass as the wind caught it. "It works," he shouted. Elwin smiled, not the polished smile used for cameras, but something softer, genuine. Kelly felt something shift inside her, a cautious hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. As weeks turned into months, Elwin's presence became consistent. He attended small school events without announcing himself, standing toward the back where he wouldn't draw attention. Instead of expensive gifts, he brought books or simple tools for D'Angelo's projects. One afternoon, Kelly noticed him quietly fixing a loose swing chain while D'Angelo played nearby. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "It needed fixing," he replied with a small shrug. His effort never came with speeches or apologies. He didn't try to rewrite the past. Trust didn't arrive all at once. It grew slowly, almost unnoticed in the spaces between conversations. One evening, as the sun set behind the trees, Kelly sat beside him on a bench while D'Angelo chased fireflies. "You're different," she said quietly. "I'm trying to be," he replied. She studied his expression, not searching for perfection, just consistency. "I don't know where this leads," she admitted. "I don't either," he said. "But I'm not in a hurry anymore." The words felt simple, but they carried a weight he hadn't known how to express years earlier. They sat there in comfortable silence, watching D'Angelo laugh in the fading light. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was the beginning of something quieter, a sense of trust forming slowly, gently, without promises, and without pressure. Autumn slipped into winter quietly, and with it came small routines Elwin never imagined himself becoming part of. One afternoon, he stood near the back of a school auditorium while parents gathered for a simple student presentation. Folding chairs lined the room, children's drawings taped unevenly to the walls. He kept his presence low, hands folded loosely, as he watched D'Angelo walk onto the stage with a group of classmates. Kelly noticed him from across the room but didn't wave. She didn't need to. There was something steady about the way he showed up, not for attention, not to impress anyone, just to be there. When D'Angelo spotted him in the crowd, his smile widened slightly, and Elwin felt a quiet warmth he couldn't explain. After the event ended, he congratulated the boy with a simple, "You did great." No grand gestures, just sincerity. And somehow, that felt more meaningful than any applause he had received at corporate events. Instead of expensive toys or flashy surprises, Elwin began bringing small things that showed he paid attention. A book about building model planes after D'Angelo mentioned wanting to learn how things fly. A sketch notebook when he noticed the boy drawing patterns in the dirt. One evening, he handed the gift to D'Angelo with a quiet smile. "I thought you might like this," he said. The boy flipped through the pages excitedly. "It has instructions. I figured you'd want to try making something new." Kelly watched from the kitchen doorway, noticing how natural the moment felt. There was no attempt to buy affection, just thoughtfulness rooted in observation. Later, as D'Angelo ran to his room to start drawing, she said softly, "You're paying attention in ways you didn't before." Elwin shrugged slightly. "I'm learning what matters to him." She didn't respond immediately, but something in her expression softened. Kelly rarely commented on the past. Instead, she observed quietly how Elwin listened when D'Angelo spoke, how he paused before answering questions, how he no longer rushed conversations toward conclusions. One afternoon, while preparing dinner, she glanced through the window and saw him helping D'Angelo adjust a small wooden structure they had been building together. He wasn't leading. He was following the child's ideas. Later that evening, as they sat at the table, she noticed how easily he fit into the rhythm of their home, not as a guest, but not fully as family either, just present. And for now, that was enough. After D'Angelo fell asleep during a movie night, the house grew quiet. Kelly joined him, leaning lightly against the counter. "You've been coming around a lot," she said gently. "I don't want to miss moments anymore," he replied. She studied him carefully. "What changed?" He took a moment before answering, choosing honesty over careful wording. "I realized how empty things felt when I went home to silence," he admitted. The confession hung in the air between them. She didn't rush to respond. Instead, she waited, allowing the quiet to hold space for whatever he wanted to say next. "For years I told myself success meant staying in control," he said softly. "But the higher everything went, the quieter my life became." Kelly's voice was calm. "You always had people around you, not in a way that felt real," he replied. "Meetings, cameras, conversations that ended the moment the deal was done." He glanced toward the hallway where D'Angelo slept. "When I started coming here, it felt different, simple but meaningful." She watched him carefully, hearing something genuine in his tone that hadn't existed before. "And now?" she asked. "I don't need everything to be perfect," he said quietly. "I just want to be present." The honesty felt fragile, like something he had carried for years without knowing how to express it. They stood there together, the kitchen filled with a peaceful silence that no longer felt heavy. Outside, distant streetlights reflected against the window, casting a warm glow across the room. Kelly didn't offer forgiveness or promises. She simply nodded, accepting the moment for what it was. "You've changed," she said softly. "I'm trying," he replied. Their conversation drifted into lighter topics. Small plans for D'Angelo's upcoming birthday, ideas for the next weekend. Nothing dramatic, just steady connection. As Elwin prepared to leave, he paused at the doorway. "Thank you for letting me be part of this," he said. She met his eyes, calm and thoughtful. "Just keep showing up." He nodded, stepping into the cool night air with a quiet sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. Inside, Kelly watched from the window, noticing how his presence no longer felt like a disruption. It felt gentle, grounded, and for the first time since their paths crossed again, the space between them held warmth instead of uncertainty. The backyard looked different than usual, filled with soft laughter, colorful balloons tied to the fence, and a long table covered with homemade snacks instead of catered trays. D'Angelo's birthday party had begun. Children ran across the grass chasing bubbles that drifted through warm afternoon light. Music played quietly from a small speaker near the porch, blending with the sound of happy conversations. Elwin stood near the garden gate holding a small wrapped box, watching the scene unfold with a calm smile. No cameras, no investors, no pressure to perform. Just a family gathering that felt grounded and real. Kelly moved between guests easily, checking on drinks and greeting parents with genuine warmth. When she noticed Elwin, she walked over with a quiet nod. "You made it early." "I didn't want to miss anything," he said. Her expression softened slightly at his words, though she didn't comment further. As the afternoon continued, Elwin found himself sitting on the grass helping a group of children assemble a small toy rocket. D'Angelo explained the rules proudly, treating him not as a guest but as someone who belonged there. "Hold it steady," D'Angelo instructed. "It has to balance." Elwin followed along, smiling at the seriousness in the boy's voice. Parents chatted nearby, completely unaware of his corporate reputation. To them, he was simply another adult helping at a birthday party. The simplicity of the moment felt unfamiliar and freeing. He realized no one here cared about headlines or achievements. They cared about laughter, shared food, and the joy of a child turning another year older. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like he had to be anything other than present. As the sun dipped lower, Kelly gathered everyone around for cake. D'Angelo stood proudly at the center, cheeks flushed from running across the yard. After blowing out the candles, he handed out slices carefully, making sure Elwyn received one with extra frosting. "I saved this for you," he said. "Thank you," Elwyn replied warmly. A few minutes later, the boy disappeared briefly into the house and returned holding a folded piece of paper. "I made something," he announced, eyes bright. He handed the drawing to Elwyn. 3 figures stood side by side, a tall man, a woman with long hair, and a smaller child between them, all holding hands beneath a bright sky. "That's us," D'Angelo said proudly. The words settled gently into the air. Elwyn felt his chest tighten, not from pressure but from something softer, recognition, belonging. He stared at the drawing longer than necessary, tracing the simple lines with quiet attention. For years he had chased success that could be measured, numbers, expansion, recognition, but nothing had ever felt like this moment. He glanced up to find Kelly watching him from across the yard. Her expression wasn't questioning, it was calm, almost hopeful. Elwyn knelt slightly to D'Angelo's level. "This is amazing," he said. "Thank you for sharing it with me." The boy grinned, then ran back toward his friends. Elwyn remained still for a second, holding the paper gently. He realized he wasn't thinking about work. He wasn't calculating the future. He was simply present. Later, as guests began to leave, Kelly joined him near the garden fence. "You've been patient," she said quietly. "I learned that rushing doesn't build trust," he replied. She studied him for a moment, searching his expression as if weighing unspoken thoughts. Across the yard, D'Angelo chased Bubbles with the last of his friends, laughter carrying through the evening air. Elwyn handed the drawing back to her carefully. "He sees something I'm still learning how to deserve." Kelly's eyes softened slightly. "You don't have to prove anything," she said. "Just keep being real." Their hands brushed briefly as she took the paper. The contact was small, but it carried a warmth that lingered longer than expected. The party ended slowly, leaving the backyard peaceful again. Balloons swayed gently against the fence as twilight settled over the garden. Elwyn stood beside Kelly watching D'Angelo run through the grass chasing fireflies. No grand declarations filled the space, no dramatic apologies, just a shared understanding growing quietly between them. "I used to think strength meant controlling everything," Elwyn said softly. "Now I think it means staying, even when you're unsure." Kelly didn't answer immediately. She simply stepped a little closer, her shoulder brushing lightly against his. They watched the child's laughter fill the evening, both aware that something important had shifted, not loudly, but deeply. For the first time, Elwyn felt like he wasn't standing outside someone else's life. He felt included in a moment that mattered more than any achievement he had chased before, and in the quiet glow of the backyard, the emotional peak arrived not through words, but through presence, steady, warm, and real. The last guest had gone home, leaving the backyard wrapped in quiet golden light. Balloons swayed gently against the fence, their colors softened by the fading sun. Somewhere beyond the trees, the city moved forward as it always did, but here the evening felt slower, almost protected from the noise of the outside world. Elwyn stood near the garden fence, watching shadows stretch across the grass. He loosened his sleeves slightly, a small sign that he no longer felt the need to hold himself in constant formality. Kelly stepped outside carrying 2 cups of tea. She handed one to him without a word. "Thank you," he said softly. For a moment, they simply stood there, side by side, letting the calm settle around them. Kelly leaned lightly against the fence, eyes following D'Angelo as he chased flickering lights near the trees. "You've been patient," she said after a while. Elwyn looked down at the cup in his hands. "I didn't know how to be anything else this time." She gave a small nod. "You stopped trying to control everything." "I'm still learning," he admitted. Her gaze softened, not filled with surprise, just quiet acknowledgement of the effort she had witnessed over months. "I noticed," she said. Elwyn rested his arms on the wooden rail, watching the evening light fade slowly into soft blues. "I used to think love was something you managed," he said quietly. "Something you fit into a schedule when everything else was stable." Kelly listened without interrupting. "Now I think it's about being here," he continued. "Not fixing everything, not trying to be perfect, just showing up." She turned toward him slightly. "And are you ready for that?" "I already am," he said. "Even if I'm still figuring out what it looks like." There was no urgency in his voice, only calm honesty. The space between them felt warm and steady, like a conversation that no longer needed defenses. D'Angelo's laughter floated across the yard as tiny lights flickered through the grass. He ran in circles, trying to catch them, his excitement filling the quiet evening with gentle energy. Elwyn watched him for a moment, a soft smile forming without effort. "He's fearless," he said. "He learned that by feeling safe," Kelly replied. The word stayed with him. For years he had chased certainty, believing safety came from control. Now he realized it came from connection, from allowing space for others to grow alongside him. A firefly drifted between them, glowing briefly before disappearing into the trees. The scene felt simple, almost ordinary, and yet it carried a sense of peace he had never known how to create before. The sky darkened slowly, leaving the garden wrapped in soft twilight. Streetlights flickered on beyond the fence, casting a gentle glow across the yard. Elwyn glanced at Kelly. "I don't expect everything to be easy," he said, "but I want to keep building something real, together, if you're open to it." She studied him quietly, searching for the version of him that once feared uncertainty. Instead, she saw someone grounded, someone willing to grow rather than control. "We'll keep moving forward," she said at last. "One step at a time." That was enough. No dramatic promises, just a shared understanding, shaped by patience and trust. As they stood there watching D'Angelo chase the last of the fireflies, the moment felt like an invitation to reflect. Have you ever realized that strength doesn't come from holding everything together alone, but from learning how to stay, even when the future feels uncertain? If this story reminded you of someone you once pushed away, or a moment you wish you could rewrite, share your thoughts below. Sometimes the most meaningful conversations begin when we're honest about our growth. And if journeys about second chances and quiet change speak to you, stay close, because stories like this are meant to be felt, not rushed. The night settled gently over the garden, wrapping everything in calm warmth. D'Angelo ran back toward them, laughing, and Elwyn knelt to meet him halfway, the drawing from earlier tucked safely in his pocket. Kelly watched them with a peaceful smile. No cameras, no headlines, just three people standing beneath a sky filled with small glowing lights. Elwyn realized that the greatest success he had ever searched for wasn't found in boardrooms or applause. It was right here, in a quiet moment shared with people who made him feel whole. And sometimes, the strongest choice a person can make isn't to control every outcome, but to listen, to grow, and to become someone worth coming home to. Subscribe to Mr. Cooper Stories. More real stories are coming.